differently, and maybe there's good reasons to do it differently, but at least within this particular political system, when we have certain kinds of elections to create certain kinds of institutions, this is the particular hierarchy we've laid out. Somebody has to make decisions, and in this case, the somebodies that get to make the decisions are the ones that exist within constitutional conventions or similar kinds of mechanisms that are making constitutional rules, like the Article 5 process and the like. We might think, though, that conventions represent a particularly special deliberative process. So the reason why conventions ought to have particular authority, or constitution makers ought to have particular authority relative to later legislators, is that they're more thoughtful than later legislators are. And I think there's actually something to be said to this kind of argument. I don't know if I'd push it too far in thinking that constitutional conventions are generally more deliberative, or constitutional decision makers are generally more deliberative than legislatures in general. But they are engaged in a very specialized and particular kind of deliberative process that separates the kinds of decisions that they're making there out. They're precisely concerned with making decisions about rules that are going to have long standing, that they understand are going to be relatively entrenched, are going to apply into the unknown future. And that encourages a certain kind of deliberation that's somewhat different than what we get in legislatures more generally, that applies in certain contexts. I know it may allow us to prefer convention making, decision making, or constitutional decision making specifically, than simply whatever decisions later legislatures might want to reach. I also think there's something to be said for the idea of constitutional conventions as having a special kind of electoral authority. So we might think that they're more deliberative than legislatures. They think more carefully. We also might think their democratic credentials are differently situated than is true for legislatures more generally. And the particular value, I think, that I want to point to here of something like a constitutional decision maker, especially in the context of a constitutional convention, is that they are temporary and separated from the general political process. So if we look historically at constitutional conventions in the United States, they often involve a lot of the same political actors, but not entirely. So it's not like the legislature just gets elected to occupy the rooms of the Constitutional Convention. It's all the same players. Instead, if we look at state constitutional conventions, and there's a lot more of those than there are federal constitutional conventions to look at, we often do see state legislatures getting themselves elected to constitutional conventions, but we also see lots of state judges getting themselves elected to that. We see former political officials and lower level political officials getting themselves elected. We see people who otherwise were not holding elective office getting themselves elected, and we see federal officials getting them